Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Felicia Johnson and we're talking about all things storage when it comes to breast milk. So to my moms out there who were exclusively pumping since day one, I'm with you. I know how it feels, and storage is so key. We don't have the pleasure of having our child latch on and be able to nurse for them to receive our breast milk. We are pumping constantly and we are storing our milk to make sure it's fresh and great for our daughter or son to receive. So early on, I had the hospital as support. I was a NICU mom. My daughter was in the hospital for 5 months and she was receiving milk through her feeding tube, through her nose, and through a G tube around 3 months. And because we were in the hospital, we had a great support system, and I was pumping constantly throughout the day and then taking my milk to the hospital. So if you're looking for those tips just around pumping, check out my other video, my part 1 to breastfeeding. This is all about storing and traveling with your milk. So the first thing for going back and forth to the hospital, I was pumping into these type of bottles, a 2.5 ounce bottle from Medela, and there's the 8 ounce bottle once my milk flow really got going. But I was constantly having to take these bottles back and forth from home to the hospital. So I had to have a good travel bag. And I really leaned on this bag right here, the Leaky Baby. And this was amazing. It comes with a ice cube kind of cooler block in here, and I was able to store my milk. Whether I wanted to zip it open in the front, or it has a side zip where I was able to have that access here. And this little bag comes out and you can wash it and clean it when you have those days where your milk spills. And only my moms out there pumping and nursing know what it feels like to put all that work into pumping and then to spill milk. It only happened to me once, but I definitely looked at it just so devastated and understood what it meant when they said don't cry over spilled milk. But regardless, so traveling back and forth from the hospital, that was my carrier system. I needed something quick over my shoulder where I can just pack it and go. The hospital was amazing where they stored my milk in the freezer. But over time, my milk got to a point where I had too much there and it was time to come home. And then I transferred over to a system that most moms, I would say, know is pumping and putting my milk into these type of storage bags. These amazing pouches are easy to store. And I realized quickly that my regular refrigerator and the freezer in there just didn't have the space for these type of bottles as well as these pouches. So I had to invest in a freezer. So really quick, the first couple things you need is the right storage bags. You need the proper labels, a big freezer bag, as well as a chest freezer. And those are the key ways to store your milk in the long term. And you'll realize that for me in the NICU, my NICU moms out there, that our babies don't tend to catch up to our supply until months later. So it's very common for us early on to have an excess amount of milk. And if the hospital is not storing for you, you need to invest in a chest freezer. And I was able to get one from a friend who got her freezer for the same reason, to store milk. And then she passed it on to me. So check with your friends, see if they have a freezer. If not, check some of those other like OfferUp and things like that. Clean it thoroughly and get a chest freezer. And I will show you the freezer I have. But I really went with the block storage, and with that, I had to have these types of pouches where I could lay them flat. So that's the key, laying them flat so they can freeze and never putting an excess amount of milk in there. When it says on the label to only put about 4 ounces, that's all you want, because once it's flat and if it's too big, it won't seal properly, and then you're going to be dealing with some spilled milk in your freezer. You don't want that. So again, you want your pouches, you want to lay them flat, and then I store them in my freezer in the house first, and sometimes I just go straight to the chest freezer. But once I have them about 8 to 10, I put them in these bags. I put them in the freezer bags so they're not having a whole bunch of singles out, and understanding kind of down the road what your child would want in one day. My daughter now receives about 30 ounces of milk. So most of my bags have between 28 and 38 ounces of milk when you add all 10 of the single blocks together. Labeling. Labeling's so key. So over here I have this little printout that I got from Pinterest, and I'll leave a little comment below so you can see it. But it has the pump dates, it has the number of ounces in each single bag, and then the number of ounces in the whole bag, and then the use by date. So you want to know how long you have your milk for. So for my moms out there wondering how good milk can be fresh for and you can keep it for, when you pump and you just leave your milk out on a countertop and it's not overly hot, it can be out for 4 hours until you need to make sure you put it in the refrigerator or freezer. If you pump and then put it right into the refrigerator, it's good for 4 days. If you pump and put it into a chest freezer, it's good for a full year. And it depends on how cold. If it's not as cold, you'll know the temperatures, but they say 6 months to a year, but I put my freezer on the coldest it can be, so it's good for a full year. So I have 1 whole year to use that milk out. And then when it comes to thawing your milk out, I like the bag system where I take 1 whole block out, knowing that I have 24 hours to use it if I thaw it in the refrigerator. So I take my block and I take my small pouches and I put them in a big bowl and put them in the refrigerator. And they thaw out within about like 4 to 6 hours. And then from that time, I have 24 hours to use that milk. I just go from when I put it in the freezer or in the refrigerator. And so now I know I have 24 hours to use it, and I never put too much. You never want to thaw too much out. So if your daughter or son is only receiving about 28 ounces a day, then thaw that out. If they're 16, thaw that out. Never go and thaw out 48 ounces if they're only receiving 20, because after 24 hours, that 18 extra ounces you have to toss it. You do not want your child to have milk that has gone bad. It will mess up it'll mess up everything. Their diapers will be a hot mess. You don't want blowouts. So that is kind of the thawing system that I use, and it works for us. So I will show you our freezer and how it looks, and some organization that I use in our freezer, as well as what it looks like when I go to thaw out the milk and then when my daughter receives it. But again, you want to have a good freezer. You want to have the pouches that you use. There's various brands, a good label. Even if you create yourself, you want to know the date you pumped, the date expires, and how much is in 1 full bag. And you gotta lay those bags flat because you want to make the best use of all the space you have in your freezer. So here we go. I'm going to show you the freezer. So first we're going to head out into the garage. That is where I keep my chest freezer. And this was an amazing gift from a friend who no longer needed it. Open it up. I mainly store my milk and some random items like waffles, but I already opened this one up for us. So this is my block storage. You see that I have the label of when I pump the milk, how many ounces are in the whole bag, and then when I have to use it by, 1 year, since it's in a chest freezer. And each bag inside is used with my pouch, these little bags, and I lay them flat so I can get as many as in here as I can. And then they're also labeled with the date I pumped, ounces, as well as the time. So this is block storage. I got these amazing little storage bins from Amazon, and so it allows me not to break my back as I'm trying to reach into my freezer. And then you'll see down here, I have about 3 or 4 more bags of the brick storage. Wow. All right. And then over here on this side, this is the type of bottles I had at the hospital. So I had about 7 bags full of these bottles. And they also are labeled on here about when they need to be used by, the expiration date. So then we come inside and look at my actual refrigerator. When it's time to thaw out my milk, I have 2 sections. So I'm still pumping right now. So I have my fresh milk. So my nurses and my husband, we all know to use this milk, has 4 days. Then I have my frozen milk that's thawing out. And once it's thawed out, we have 24 hours. So they know that this is only good for 24 hours. So let's use this milk first. And this is how many milliliters of milk Clea is getting right now. So everyone always knows to measure it out, and we're always on the same page. That's it. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. I know when I was getting ready to store my milk, I leaned on my friends and I watched so many YouTube videos. So I hope this kind of compiles everything together, especially for my NICU moms out there who are trying to figure out how to get back and forth from the hospital and what that looks like. I also want to add that if you have extra milk and you don't have room because they're making you store it in these type of bottles because they seal better, they don't tend to like the pouches, that there also is milk banks out there that will take your extra milk. So I donated a lot of milk to a local milk bank, the Northwest Mother's Milk Bank. They were amazing to work with. They will work with a hospital, so you don't feel like you have to handle the whole situation. You just fill out the survey, you answer a handful of questions, your doctor will talk to them about your health, and then they will go ahead and transfer the milk back and forth for you, and you can be hands off. So look into that. If you have so much milk and your freezer is just not big enough, there are milk banks out there, but at the end of the day, I just hope you have the best breastfeeding journey, and I hope this helps. Thanks, guys.